Hello, everyone. It's Douglas coming to you from Cape Town. And today we have two people, Linda, who I know well because she's done programs with me and she's going to tell you a bit about what she does. And then we have Roshmi, and Roshmi and I have only just met. And the reason why the conversation is the three of us is Linda had a story she put on 3,000 Stories where she brought in conversations she'd had with Roshmi, who's a psychotherapist, and how the 1, 2, 3 and attachment theory and theories in yoga all seem to have like common roots. And I think the part that got me the most is the concept that you said about when there's a truth, you will find it. I believe that if the 1, 2, 3 is a truth, then it's applicable everywhere, anytime, no matter what. If the body priority system is a truth, it's always applicable, which means it's never not. And we can speak about it in different languages and different ways and terms and coming from different places. But it actually is a central topic. So it just seemed like a really good thing to have a conversation about that. So thank you, ladies, for taking this time to spend with me. And yeah, so Linda, why don't we start with you? Just tell everyone a little bit about you and what you're doing, and yeah, let's go from there.
So I've been teaching Hatha Yoga for it's 12 years now, which means I'm getting very old. And stumbled across BeActivated via a client who went to see a physiotherapist who'd been on the course, and he said, "You have got to go and talk to her because you will love this stuff. She did something really weird with me and you would like it." So I went and had a chat with her. I then asked her to work on my father, who had had a slip disc, I think about 8 years previously, and had been left with a drop foot and some serious pain at various times.
Which sounds quite common with the normal system, just got left with. We go so far and we have no more answer.
That's it. And he spent an hour with her, and she lives near to me, and he traveled to my house, and then he went and saw her. And when he got out of the car, when he came back from her, it was a different person. So I thought, right, I've got to go and see what that's all about. So that's how I came to you, and which was about so it's about 7 years ago, I think. I did the level 1, and had no idea what I was going to do with it. And I'm still finding my way with it, to be quite honest, because I had no other I've got no other manual therapy training at all. So it's the only manual therapy that I've ever done. So finding a way in and deciding how I was going to use it has always been one that I've struggled with. Roshmi came and joined me at one of my classes. So she came to me for a yoga class.
Yeah.
And we got chatting after one of those, and I mentioned the BeActivated stuff as well as my yoga, and we decided we would get together and just have a play one afternoon. And from that, we ended up doing various work with teams who are sort of in high pressure front lines. So youth offending service staff, teaching staff, and the last one that we worked with was an adolescent charity, wasn't it? It was for children coming out of care. So we worked with their staff, looking at resilience. And so all the work we've done has been about embodied work. And Roshmi and her work has always done some embodied stuff too.
So what do you mean by embodied?
So a lot of training that you see out there for teens is chalk and talk, and it's all up here.
Aha.
And there are the majority of people I meet who don't do something like yoga or anything are so up here and know nothing about what else is going on.
Well, there are hundreds of people who know what the answer is. They just haven't done anything with it.
So we take them into their bodies first so that they feel what they do. And I had real confidence doing it with Roshmi, because that first afternoon we played together, I don't know if you remember this, Roshmi, but that first afternoon we played together, you did two things. You talked to me about a walking exercise you do with your clients, and we did an exercise where we held a rope between us and investigated the relationship between me and my son. And it was the first bit of embodied learning other than yoga training that I felt I had done. And it has stayed with me so much because I learned it through my gut.
Oh,
I didn't learn it.
there's a powerful intro into you, Roshmi. You're
No
on the other end of
then.
the rope. What do
No
you
pressure
say on
then.
the other end of the rope? That sounds cool. I want a rope.
If only we could, Doug, in this Zoom setting, actually hold at end of a rope. Yeah, so I'll just say a little bit about me. I'm trained as a creative arts psychotherapist. And what that means is my original training enabled me to work with psychological, emotional, and mental distress using creative arts as central to transformation and healing.
Cool.
And by creative arts, what that kind of meant in my training was the use of symbol, image, metaphor, creativity as tools of change, as tools of transformation. Now, from that place of training, on the actual training, we had a couple of days. It wasn't much. It was like maybe 2 weekend days where we had a trainer coming in from what is known as the embodied therapies.
Right.
So they're still psychological therapies, but they use the body. They work through the body to aid psychological distress. And we had a couple of trainers coming in, and I participated. And those were by far the most powerful weekends of my whole training. So I learned to use, for example, sand tray images or art images or, masks and those sorts of things. But the more that I used them, the more I realized the physicality of everything. Even when we're looking at an art image, we're looking at it through our bodies, not just through our eyes. So I became more and more interested, and I sought out clinical supervision. We're all required to have clinical supervision. So I sought out clinical supervision, first of all, from a drama therapist who worked in very embodied ways, and then with a dance movement psychotherapist. So I spent many years sort of under the, under the wing, really, of some very embodied practitioners, and developing my practice, which is both creative, but I would say creative embodied. And what I mean by embodied is that what I find interesting, the most interesting to work with, is the psychological and emotional body. Yeah, there's the physical body.
Let's say I say to you, I'm not really sure what you're talking about. I'm walking off the streets and you've got, I go, hey, this place, it's interesting. What do you do here? What would you say to me? And it's one of the hardest questions to answer in BeActivated. Like, what is it in one sentence?
What is it in one sentence?
It's like I still haven't figured out that one sentence, because I always go, it depends who's asking.
Yeah.
But
I mean, what I would.
But what is it to you? Like, if I come off the street and I say, what is it that you do here?
Well, it depends on who you are, but you, Doug, and perhaps others who are. It's difficult. It's difficult, depending on who you are. But I would say that I talk with you. What I do is I will talk with you, and I will notice what happens to me and to you as we speak together, as we talk together. And the more I notice, the more I can get a sense of where trauma, and I'm going to use that word.
Yeah, it's good.
Trauma is stored in your body. Now, that trauma might be physical trauma, like I've been in a car crash or I've been in a whatever. But in my work, it's more emotional trauma and psychological trauma.
Perfect. So right now, if we didn't know who you were, you could be someone who is doing BeActivated in a very mindful, considered way, because what you just described,
yeah,
it would be a perfect session, actually, because that's what we do. We have conversations with someone, and sometimes we do go, that's weird. When you say that, this is what I feel.
Yes.
And they go, oh, well, that.
Yeah.
And so it's absolutely, because what we need to be in a session is the reference point.
Yes.
And so we can't get lost in their story.
No.
But we do have to be a reference point or a mirror to reflect back what we see. So when we see changes, when we see things we don't understand, hey, what I see is this. What does that mean to you?
Yeah.
And they might say, hey, nothing, because it's Doug, that's your stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, for me, it is what I see, but what I experience in my body. And in psychotherapy, we call that countertransference.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in some schools of psychotherapy, I call it countertransference. It's your felt sense of what goes on in your own body when I'm hearing you speaking to me.
Got you.
Yeah.
Do you know what the sad irony is? Sorry to jump in.
Yeah, go for it.
We had lectures at university and in my physiotherapy degree where the whole idea of transference was considered a really bad element. You're a bad therapist if there's any transference at all.
Yeah.
I was like, hell no.
No way.
How can you reach another human being if you are not bringing your humanity and your human self to them?
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
How we meet people, whether we meet
absolutely
the tissue or the human being.
And in some schools where they don't believe in transference and countertransference, they call it embodied empathy, or empathy in progress.
Right.
Yeah. So there's something about, here I am, a human being with you as a human being. You're feeling stuff. I'm feeling stuff. We're feeling each other's stuff. That's empathy. That's about mirror neurons, right? That's empathy.
Absolutely.
And actually, even if you do decide it's a bad thing, you can't do anything to stop it.
Exactly.
If you're going to ignore it, then you have to block it somehow.
Absolutely. And I think isn't that half of the idea of trauma is, if I'm not going to deal with it because I don't have the tools, the skills, the knowledge, or even know that I should, then I do have to block it. I do have to put it somewhere. And so we can be talking about a physical trauma. We can be talking about emotional, spiritual, all of those behavioral things. And it all manifests in the body. So, one of the things that I've done over the years, the first time I actually did it was in Jakarta with a nice big workshop. And we were playing with movement and secrets. And I just called 3 people up. And I said, we're going to have a good secret, a bad secret, and a naughty secret. Okay. So what we did is we first had a baseline, 3 people up, have a walk. So that's their baseline without us influencing, because we always have to have a starting point. Otherwise, if I immediately give them something, we don't know where it goes. So then I said, all right, you've got the good secret. Ooh, it's a nice thing. You've got a bad secret, something like a guilt or shame. You've got a naughty secret. Okay, walk. And it was like 3 different human beings started walking across the room. And it was an experiment, because the idea of play is the most important thing in my world. Is if an idea pops into my head, I trust that it's not there for no reason. So I'll try. And if we do an experiment and it doesn't work, okay. That was just, but if every time you try something and you will only do it if you guaranteed it's going to work, well, good luck with that, because then you're never going to learn and expand. So then we swapped them around. Okay, you had the good secret, now you have the bad secret. You had the bad secret, now you have the naughty secret. And again, their walks change, their physiology changed. And some people listening to this will go, oh, well, that's obvious. No, you need to see a room of 40 people observing this in shock. Because, you know, how do you walk up to someone and they go, wow, are you all right? And you go, yeah. Well, you don't look it. How did they know? They watched. They got it. They got an empathetic read, if you like, on your movement, and we interpret and reflect.
We've used those walking exercises a lot, haven't we? So the first one Roshmi ever told me about was the client who was having a problem with her boss, and you made her walk as herself and then walk as if she were her boss, to imitate her boss, and then walk as if she was walking alongside her boss. And they observed that together. And we've done things. So do you remember the last one with the teachers? Roshmi?
I was just thinking about the teachers and thinking how we
had them walking towards their day. So we had them sort of leaving their house, and it was a bright sunny day, and it was the start of the week, and they were feeling good about the week, and then to envisage themselves approaching school. So, and we've done a little bit of preparation work before, but basically to see themselves approaching school. And you could
see the change in their movement, their posture, their gait, their gaze, everything changed.
Weight, everything. And they could see it so clearly.
I can just imagine that magic moment when they get that. That's the aha. That's when the work really begins, because, and this is the same in the world of activation. You can actually physically see changes. Muscles are getting stronger, tests are getting better, they look better. But if they don't get it, if they don't, you haven't, the work isn't done, you know. But it's in that recognition. You remind me of a story of someone who I trained. I think she came to a Guy's Hospital. We did a program years ago, and her story was very much around work. But it turned, you know, she was a researcher, and one of her colleagues had literally hijacked her research and published, but they still worked together. And she, 20 minutes from work, is where she lived. So in the morning, she'd wake up, she was absolutely fine, and she'd walk to work every day. And within about 5 minutes of getting to the hospital where she was working, her pain would start to come on. By the time she got to work, she was in agony, and she spent the whole day at work in agony. And when she left work, she just couldn't wait to leave work. And at about that 5-minute mark the other way, the pain started easing. By the time it was gone. And so she'd been having lots of work on this, but nobody understood that the story was the stressor that she was walking into. And how just in that understanding, you start to take control of that physiology and you have a choice. Okay, so, I'm 5 minutes from work, the pain's starting to come, I can keep walking and the pain will increase, or I can do something to interrupt the pattern and understand what's going on. Or when I get to work, I can take a different level of strength, as you guys are talking about, to that same situation, and therefore behave differently in that environment and change the stimulus. So the stimulus no longer impacts on me.
Yeah. And it's fascinating to watch. And there's always, I don't know if you still find this when you're working with people, but there's always that thing as you set something up and you go, there's no way it's going to work this time. There's no way I'm going to see it this time. This group just don't feel like they're so receptive and up for it. We're not, and you see it, you see something every time.
Every time, yeah.
That is really useful.
Yeah.
But you know, I was a waiter for 8 years when I was a student. And the one thing that I learned looking back was on the days where I felt crap and I almost let go of all expectation because I felt terrible. I wasn't having a good day. I'd leave and I'd be going, did I make double the tips today? How is that possible? Because I'd let go of all expectation. On the days where you arrive, you go, yeah, it's a beautiful day. My tech section's busy. I'm going to rock this. Whoa. And you go, geez, these stingy buggers, what's their problem? And so it's that same idea when we're working with clients, when we, if you always walk in and you go, I've got this, I know what the problem is, just like the waiter going, I know what you need, you are going to miss a whole lot of stuff. Whereas if we present what we've got and we almost go, let's see, wow, maybe not this time, and we're open to, it might not work.
Yeah.
Then you actually open yourself up to the fact that it can work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you remember that day where we had to completely change tack?
Yeah, we just threw out the window, didn't we, what we were going to do, because we sensed the room. You have to sense the room when you're doing group work. The
thing we'd done then, if you remember, is we knew that the group that we were working with had been through quite a traumatic week as a group, and we started tiptoeing. We didn't go in and do what we normally do.
No, that's right. And then
talk.
Yeah, but the other bit of that is that the content of their story started taking over. And this is the thing you were saying, Doug, that content is important up to a point, but it's not content. You're listening more deeply than content.
Yeah. And the thing is that people who've done workshops with me know that we get people who, when we do the hello at the start of workshops, I'm brutal. If you're going to monologue, I'm going to call you on it, because monologuing is you're speaking lots, telling me nothing. I get nothing. So therefore, you've spoken 5 minutes, and I know nothing more about you other than information. And it's kind of like they drown you in information, so that you actually can't see them at all. And that is one of their strategies of survival.
Absolutely.
And so if we are polite and we let them speak and say nothing, then we're not serving them and we're not serving ourselves. So it also has to be, you have to have a courage in yourself also to be able to say, when things come up, this is what's coming up in me, and I'm reflecting back to you. Does it make sense to you? But if something comes up and you go, oh, I've got almost no scientific basis to say that, and then you put it down, that might have been the thing that most needed to be said. So if, as you guys said, sometimes you just throw things out the window. I love it. It's like,
and actually it's one of the things that came back to me when you were saying that was trust the process. Often do that. That's a little mantra with me when I'm working, particularly with the BeActivated stuff, is trust the process.
Trust the process, yeah.
And we had put a process in place, and it had worked well with 2 groups. But because I think we got slightly frightened of how they might be and how hard it might be for them, that we went away from the process.
Yes.
So you've I'm assuming you found yourselves in the end with that, but like anyone, when you walk into a space with fear and trepidation, you're not safe. So therefore you cannot create a space for me if you bring fear, because creating a space means it doesn't have to be a huge space. It's not like I have to fill the whole room with like warm fuzzy feeling. It has to be safe. And like I'm really obsessive when I set up a room, because I don't care if everyone's there and they're waiting. I will change the room and change the room and change the room until I am comfortable. Comfortable means my body physiologically says I can teach here for the next 10 hours, today, tomorrow, the next, for 4 days. Because if I allow that, it doesn't feel quite right, but I'll push through. By the end of the first day, I am exhausted. I have worked too hard. And that's when you're chasing results and chasing outcomes. And it's horrible. If I know that if I can allocate, I can waste an hour doing it. I don't care. I guarantee you the next 45 hours will be phenomenal, because I've taken care of how I am in this space.
It was the same in my yoga space the other day. I had a mess behind my screen, Roshmi, when I was teaching your class the other day.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I dumped a whole load of stuff from the house into my yoga studio. And
You wouldn't have known it.
I
You
knew
wouldn't have known it. You
I
knew
knew
it.
it. I was
Yeah.
knackered at the end of that session.
Yeah.
And it was
But
because all the time I was teaching,
yeah,
trying to ignore the stuff that
all of that stuff that was there. You know, it's interesting what comes up for me around that is often when I'm offering trainings or working with groups or even individuals, that you have to name something. I think if I sit there kind of going, well, I'm okay, I'm all right in this moment, I'm perfect. You know, sometimes you have to name, do you know what? Feeling a little bit nervous giving this presentation today, or actually there's a nervousness and an excitement for me. I think to name what you're feeling is really important, because that also holds up a bit of a mirror, but kind of in a other sort of way, doesn't it?
And the thing is that it's more than just in your head going, I'm feeling nervous, because when we can verbalize it, even if you say it to yourself, but you actually say, hey, wow, Doug, you're quite nervous today. I don't have to say it to you guys, but what it is, it's bringing my physiology into the feeling. And so that's why it's
Yes.
really important in our work that when we do something with someone, they get up, they walk, how do you feel? And it is amazing, and we'll see it often in when people give feedback, is they'll have people who look at them blankly for maybe the first 2 sessions, because they're like, what do you mean, how do I feel? What they're actually saying is, I have no connection into what I'm feeling. My system won't allow me to do that yet.
That's
and
it.
so when that almost that aha moment where we drop down the staircase and we shift into a different autonomic space, that's when they suddenly, wow, that feels different. Now, they haven't named it, but they've used feeling. And it's amazing how they suddenly, the language changes in the way. And sometimes someone will be up and they'll be going, oh, wow, this is, I don't actually know what I feel. And you go, that's fine. Because if you've never felt before, because let's say my whole life, let's just say it's a birth trauma. And I've seen so many of these that it's the most common thing, that had a birth trauma, that there was so much pain, maybe the umbilical cord was wrapped around my throat, so much pain that my body actually turned off my feeling mechanisms in order to help me survive and get through that birthing process. But I was never given the opportunity, or nothing ever triggered me to let that go. So I grow up as a kid who can't feel. But since there's nothing to compare it to, it's normal for me. But I'm a disruptive kid because I can't feel. So the only way I feel anything is I push harder, I bully, I run into things, I hurt, all of those things. So if as an adult you've got to this point and someone's going, what do you feel? I'm like, what a stupid question. What do you mean, what do I feel? And whereas it's because in their system, on day one that they were coming out into this planet, that they already had that survival strategy set up in it. And
the disconnectedness that comes with that survival strategy.
And it's a survival strategy. So we still have to recognize that the body did a good job. Because we say it a lot. Hey, you're still alive. It must have worked. And they go, but I feel like shit. Yep. Okay. Well, that was the sacrifice. You get to live, but you're going to feel like shit. Would you like to do it differently yet? And that's when you go, well, can we turn off the survival mechanism and go into a different place where you can see and recognize what your body's doing, see and recognize what you're feeling. And if you're feeling something and you've got emotions, you've got behavioral patterns, which you're going to repeat over and over. And because you have physical patterns that you're going to repeat over and over, and they're all the same, they're all like beautifully knitted together. And so the thing is, if you want to unravel something, find a little thing and start pulling. It'll unravel. And whether it be from an emotional side, a story side, a movement pattern, a behavioral pattern, they're all ways where what we're looking for is the person underneath it to say, hey, there you are.
Do you come across, Doug, I found quite a few times people feeling guilty that they've been doing it wrong, that they've been living their lives wrong, that they've been holding themselves wrong. You know, they're guilty that in their physicality, they've not been breathing with a diaphragm and they've been breathing up here.
Yeah.
See that? And it's like, no, you can't be guilty. You're not guilty about that.
You're not
wrong.
responsible for what you don't know that you don't know.
Yeah.
You're responsible when you know that you know, or you know that you don't know. So then if you've told me and I still choose not to do it, well, that's my choice. But if I didn't even know, what am I to do with it? So I would be kind of very much coaching them that, well, guilt is really going to help you here, isn't it? Well, why? I should have, but now you're going to go out and you're going to feel guilty, and then you're going to create a whole lot of other stupid patterns, because guilt is also going to shut you down.
Yeah.
Woo! Good job. Thanks.
Absolutely.
My time.
I've been fascinated the number of times I hear that. Oh no, I've been doing it wrong. Well, no, you've not been doing it wrong.
No, you've been doing it how you've been doing it.
Found a way to get you through, and you've got here, and now we're going to change the way. You're going to change the way you do it if you want to.
But you also see how quickly, almost how people's default is judgment. And yeah, the stories that they're going to tell is about how my mother or my father or my teacher, they told me that I wasn't good enough. But the problem is, one day they stopped saying that because you were doing it for yourself. So you take up the mantle, and you that same judgment, and so that they don't need to say a word from now on, because you've so got into that story. And you keep repeating the story that you start to believe, I'm not worthy. Therefore, every time I find an error, I must carry guilt and shame because, oh, wow, I wasn't doing it right. I'd like to find anybody in the entire planet who's doing everything right, because I know I'm not.
No. I also think I wanted to bring in one of my key areas of interest, which is transgenerational trauma.
Ooh.
Because I think that scripting and patterning can not only happen in your own lifetime, but also can be carried through from generation to generation, body to body. And there's a lot of research now in this area where people are looking at how trauma gets transferred literally through the DNA, through the ovary, through the egg, through the sperm, into the bodies of the babies, and that trauma then continues generation to generation. So in that, the body work requires the deep listening and the visceral self-experience and the activation, whatever that's going to be, the unraveling, as you say, it's a beautiful word, Doug. But then also recognizing that some of that isn't even of this generation and this body, but has been put there.
But okay, for starters, that's biblical. You know, the sins of the father become the sins of the son. So I can very, very clearly tell you that I do what I do today because of two things, generational wise. One is when my father died, we had a thing about a month before where I literally picked up and grabbed everything of his and spent 13 years dealing with stuff which I didn't recognize, but it wasn't mine. And it, and not in 1,000, but at the same time, when Matthew was born, the first day I held him, I remember literally having so much overwhelm and love, and then it was also oh fuck, I better start doing my work, because if I don't do my work, he is going to have to do it, because unless I've got to let go. I want Matt to deal with his stuff. I want Matt to have to deal with him as a kid in this world, not a kid in this world as dumped on by his father and his mother, as dumped on by his grandparents and the generational stuff. So I'm a great believer in that. But here's the question I have for you, because I haven't gone into it much, like on a DNA level, but what about the nature nurture kind of thing? So if I've got it in, if I have something in my DNA, it does require the environment to almost nurture it into reality. So I can have potential for trauma in a DNA strand or carrying a pattern of trauma. But as a baby, I'm going to mirror and mimic my primary caregivers. And so I can have my parents and they cannot be my primary caregivers. So I'll have less influence of them because I won't be mimicking. And I always find it so fascinating, like a healthy baby in the first 6 months, their brain waves are like so wide open that they literally have no filters. They pick up everything. And then at 6 months, it goes more into, I think that's from is it a gamma? No, and then we go into theta, where there's a bit of filtering. And then as you get a bit older, 5 years old, then we get into alphas and betas. But when those kids are wide open, then almost that's when that parental pattern can reach in and activate those sequences. But if they never get activated, I'm not even sure what I'm asking. I'm thinking out loud, which is usually chaos. But it's almost, yeah, it's a very interesting thing, because you can.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting thing because I think a lot of the research has been done, even looking at, for example, where people have, so for example, in the Black community, they talk a lot about transgenerational trauma or inherited trauma from slavery.
Yeah.
Okay. But it's not only the trauma experienced by slaves, but also trauma experienced by people who witnessed the harm done to the bodies of the slaves. This is body-to-body trauma.
Right.
Yeah. So this travels through the generations. And one of the ideas I work with a lot is that how in that moment, that almost like the ancestral bit can emerge in your body, in the room, in my case with a client, but that we are all carrying in our body, in our DNA, those ancestral patterns. Yeah, either of the being on the receiving end of trauma, or administering trauma, or witnessing trauma, from those 3 positions.
So if we are accepting of those ideas, my question would be, how do we get people to understand that in a simple way, that they can do something with it? Because what is interesting is when I had my first practice in Cape Town, I started seeing a pattern from a certain group of people coming, and we'd be doing work and connecting with stuff. And I go, oh, what's this? And they go, oh, that's from a past life. And I'd go, that's really nice. But your pain is in this life and you have to deal with it in this life. I don't want to poo-poo the past life, because if, you know, it's all of these things are things we have to remain open to. But what I did find is that the tendency was for people to put responsibility for a pattern onto something that was over there, which meant they never had to do anything with it, because it's like blaming. It's like blaming your government for doing something.
I agree. Although I think,
how do we do the generational thing differently? Because that's not past lives.
No, it's not past life. The generational thing is different. And also for me, there's a difference between giving the responsibility or blaming. For me, there's something about taking ownership. Just like you did when you held your child for the first time. Suddenly you took ownership in that moment for all the sins of the fathers, if you like. Yeah, in that moment, for the sake of this beautiful child, you knew you had to take ownership of something. You didn't know what it was, but you knew you had to take ownership of something.
It's actually that's what started me on my teaching, because I always knew I had to teach, always. But it was much easier not to. It was much easier just to almost use the the skill set and the gifts that I'd been given, and do whatever I wanted with them for me.
Yes.
And suddenly it was far bigger than
Yes.
me. And
it was bigger than you. Yeah.
yeah, you know, which
Yes.
yeah,
To
sorry.
come back to your point, you talk about what do you do with that
In this moment,
in
yeah.
this moment. I think what we do with that is what you do with that all the time, is you go, that's here, that's present, the effect of that is here and present. And let's face it, with some people, you never identify what that is.
Yeah.
You suspect that there is some trauma that has led them to this pattern, but they might not really know. And we might never be able to identify, or we might misidentify, because there might be a very obvious car crash that they had, but actually it might be something before that that was actually a trauma. So in one sense, it almost doesn't matter. And this is where it comes back into the yoga stuff and the very much present embodied stuff, is what is here? What is here, wherever it's come from, what is here? How do we make it safe to let go of this? And that's where the work happens.
That's a huge piece. I think that's very awesome, because, you know, I think in our workshops we talk about, sometimes your client knows what's going on and they need to tell you, they need to express, but it's not my job to say, do you know what it is? Tell me about it. Because I'm very clear, most of the time, you don't need to know anything. If they need to tell you their story, that's their need. That's different to you wanting to know the information. And people get very confused with this, because I like the idea of, do you know what's going on with this? I do. Is it something you need to share, or is it something that you're good and we can, exactly as you said, we work with this and we work to let that go through whatever the process is. And if they go, I'm clear what it is, I'm ready to let it go, awesome, I need to know no more. If they're like, I actually need to share this, and it is, you know, it's so much of that is, sometimes people have to share because their strategy of survival was silence, and so therefore the overcoming of silence is to speak.
Absolutely. I think that's really vital. I think that's such a key idea.
It's not
So
for
there's
everybody.
an invitation if they want it, but they don't have to, because you know, we always want to go, I'm not the psychotherapist in this conversation, but I can be someone who reflects back what I heard. And that's it. And then it's two human beings doing work.
And it all again comes back to that, you don't know what you don't know. And I went to a workshop with a guy called Matthew Sanford, who I might have mentioned to you before, Doug, who is a yoga teacher, but he's a paraplegic and has been since his early teens, and didn't start doing yoga until after that. So one of his ways out of trauma was yoga. Nice. And now he teaches, and he's an amazing teacher, really fascinating guy. And he did a workshop where he talks about the subtle body, and I'm not even going to try to explain, because you have that little inkling that you might know a little bit of what that's about, but one of the things he said was, you don't know what you don't know, but what you don't know is happening. Lean into the happening.
Ooh.
And for him, that, you know, the route into finding what is happening is asana, is our yoga poses. Yeah. And it's, you know, basically saying you might not know what's there, but it's happening anyway. We inquire, and our route into that inquiry for him is the physical practice.
Awesome.
And, you know, and that is, and, you know, and this is a guy who can reflect what is happening in my feet and express something that I am probably feeling in my feet almost before I even know it, without being able to feel his own feet. And it's
so then I'm almost, my brain says, does that mean that the subtle energy field is the same as when somebody has a limb amputated and they have the phantom limb pain? We had, because the reason why I say this is Jess in Chicago had a most remarkable story when she was working with a lady who had I think she had a car accident, but she lost her arm in the accident. But before this, she was a 3-3-3 arm. And the only way her left psoas would hold is if she imagined her fist was tight. And then her psoas would hold. There was no fist.
Yeah.
But the brain said, if this, I'll give you that. That's remarkable. It's like, and maybe that same memory and pathway, he's just has so mastered the understanding that he can look, see, and feel through that. I don't know, but that's
I think that's part of it. But I think I did one of his exercises with you in a class straight after I'd been to his workshop, and it was a Zoom workshop again. And we had one bent leg, and we were sitting on the floor, but the bent leg the foot was resting against the other leg, and you're trying to use both legs as the foundation. And the thought then is that the bent leg side, you just reach out through that bent leg as if it were extended. It's a really lovely exercise.
Yes, yes.
Reach out through that leg as if it's extended. So you're kind of imagining that you're going out past your own knee.
Yes, yes.
You root further down into this, and this is, I should show you. So if you've got your leg like this, yes?
Yeah.
And this other leg extended.
Yeah.
And you root out through this leg as if it were an extending leg. Hard because I'm sitting on an office chair.
Yeah.
This roots you back down and out through your extended leg, and your whole foundation becomes more secure. So it's almost like you were saying about amputation. You know, imagine if you cut off through this knee, but you still extend out through that knee, you get that whole reaction back into the center line. And when you find the center line, you find your
I have a question for you.
Yes.
So then what stops people? This is a very current, what's in the space of the world right now. What stops people taking that really cool concept and standing a correct distance apart, 1.5 meters, or is it 2 meters? We can't quite tell anymore. And extending out to each other.
Nothing.
Just a thought. Just a thought. As you saying that, my brain's like going, holy crap, maybe this is what, you know, so we can all stand correctly apart and yet still fully connect.
Well, one of the
we have to find other things that we, you know, skills that we have, abilities that we have that we've not needed or didn't even know we had, and grow them and do different within the confines of the rules that we have.
Yeah, one of the things I talked about quite early on when we started working on Zoom, and I realized that I had gone into our little local shop in the village and had started to feel like, you know, this person was too close, I was starting to really do this not in a good way. And when I came out of the shop, it was like, you know, I was then able to let go of it. But one of the things that I then talked about with my clients was to remember that we always have a personal space issue. We've always had a limit. And you know those people who habitually will come a bit too close to you in conversation, and you just want them to back off a little bit. Yeah. We've got a personal space.
Listen, I live in South Africa, and we have different cultures that have different interpretation of space. So as a white in South Africa, we like our space. If you're African, if you're black, to give too much space is an insult. So therefore it's amazing watching people stand in queues.
Yeah.
Because and you know, it's really difficult at the moment because people are queuing for a really small amount of money every month to help them survive, and they're being like policed. You have to stay apart, and there's this dilemma going on. And there was a real horrible thing that happened last week where somehow there was a mess up with the temporary disability grants. And so everyone had to literally go and apply again because it's just an administrative stupid thing. But the police, and it's a silly story, but the police got so angry that nobody would separate. You know, they have disability, they're unsafe, so therefore they go to what's comfortable. They used a water cannon on them.
Oh, God.
And they've been standing there for like hours and hours and hours. And at no point did somebody go, they're not trying to do this to be difficult or rebellious. They're doing this because they feel unsafe. This is their safe space. They've all got masks on, but they're just a little bit close. And it's really sad because it's like we see a lot of things like that happening, that in this like this pot, this of boiling pot of the buttons are being pushed and people react in different ways. And part of that reaction is also their background, their cultural thing. You know, I remember when at the end of my first year, I went on a sales tour and got to make money as a student, and it was crazy. It was called a duplex sales tour. And I went into an area, at that point, this is more than 28 years, where there were still certain demarcated areas. This is like a homeland area. And we were going into the kind of the African areas, the Black areas, and going door to door. And there were just some amazing people that I met. And the one family that I kept going and visiting every time I went into the area in Mabopani, the one day they're making tea, and with a saucer and the tea, and it's quite hot. And the dad just takes his tea and pours it into the saucer and puts down the cup and starts drinking from the saucer. And I'm sitting there, I'm 18, 19. And I don't know what to do with myself. Like, these were lovely people. Up until this point, everything was as comfy as could be. But that just upset something in me, because it made no sense. And so I carried that with me. And then a couple of years later, we were doing a lecture, and we had a psychiatrist from Falkenberg Mental Health Institute. And I put up my hand and said, I don't know why, but I want to tell you a story. Does this make any sense about the pouring of the tea into the saucer? And this lady was like, that's quite amazing that you brought that up. We actually almost had a riot in the wards because the white patients were so disturbed by the Black patients all doing that. And I'm like, okay, so I'm not as mad as I thought. But you know why they do it?
To cool it down.
Cool down quicker.
Yeah, to cool. My dad always drank tea from the saucer, always.
Yeah, but you see, you didn't bat an eye. I know, I could have told you that already. You're telling me something that's so normal. But for me, it's so not normal that therefore it's voodoo, it's weird. And so how quickly we judge through our filters that we don't even know, that we don't understand. Our cultural relativism is the filter.
Yeah.
And
at the moment, that thing like the habitual space is now being imposed on us, that it has to be that space.
Well, this is it. Yeah.
At first, it feels horrible and everything, but I sort of have been trying to say to people, just accept that's your new personal spacing. It doesn't make you more distant from that person who is 2 meters away. And my savior through.
No, but Linda, I'm thinking about what you shared. So So what happens if you sat 3 people the correct distance apart on a Zoom call, so but 3 people in the same space, and you got them to do the extending work, first extending down to the ground, but then extending. So let's say I have to be 2 meters apart from somebody else. I only have to reach a meter, because they're going to do the other meter. I don't know. Look, this is for anyone who is watching or listening to this. This is where ideas come from. It doesn't mean they're good ideas. They're just ideas. You have a conversation, something comes up, and you go, well, why can't we do that?
Yeah. But actually, without even doing a specific exercise, I have felt that, because in between our various lockdowns, and God knows where we are now. Are we lockdown 3, Roshmi? What we did?
3.
In between time, we had a time where we were able to get back in a physical space.
Yeah.
So I had a reduced class numbers, but I was able to get them back in a physical space. So I went around in the morning, measuring out 2 meters to the center of the mat. But actually, after the first session, where I became in, was a bit nervous because I hadn't been in a room with more than, their family for a while. Once we got over that, once we knew the spacing, once everybody was happy, you just felt it. You just felt that this is why we practice together. Yoga's an individual practice, but this is why we together. Because
well, there's a group consciousness. And if you have a group consciousness, then you have a sense of belonging. And a sense of belonging is a very, very deep-seated human need. And if your needs are not being met, you have no choice but to go into a survival mode. A survival mode does not help you belong, ironically. So it's this catch-22. So I think that's friggin' spot on.
And that's why when we all started teaching over Zoom, after the first few weeks of teaching over Zoom, I was thinking, why am I so tired? Why am I so tired? And it's because there's no bounce back. The amount of energy I get from picking up those other cues rather than working just through this visual channel.
That's why I love teaching in person, and that's why, these poor people, Roshmi, we tell them Doug may sometimes run late, but sometimes we 12, 13, 14, 15 hours in, and they don't want to go either. But and the thing is, you're not tired at the end, because that it is that exchange of energy and interaction that's a really important part of human nature, and every culture has that. And so it is, there's a disturbance of the fabric. And the problem is that when we're talking, because there's something that does keep popping up in my head, is there are so many people who are just barely getting by with depressions and mental illnesses and loneliness before all of this started. And now the amplification is insane. And I'm curious on what you guys are seeing. And then again, like, and how do we help? How do we bring service to people? And sometimes it is just a tiny thing. It doesn't, because we know point of focus is a big thing. And if I'm looking at the hopelessness, it's constantly shutting down. I have less rights. I can do less. Wow, life is going to be just this dark implosion. I'm living in a black hole, and the outcomes are not going to be great. But how do we turn lights on? And it's a question. And I'm not saying that as I know what the answer is. I have ideas, but what you guys are talking about, this, especially coming from the psychotherapy side, and so you'll be at least hearing a lot more about, and we all know worldwide the mental illnesses are, people are struggling.
It's huge. And I think at all levels, I think there's the issue of isolation that affects people kind of who perhaps live on their own, don't have household members. So the issue of isolation is huge, and people are developing, lots of serious or as you say, accelerating lots of serious issues like depression or anxiety or panic, or or even grief and bereavement can be really difficult when you're isolated. And then equally, I think young people, children and young people, are experiencing a huge amount, because there's something about the age group, teenage age group, where there's quite a big reliance on peer groups, and learning online. As you say, Linda, you don't have that time in between lessons where you're in a corridor pushing and shoving and kind of having a bit of a chat and a bit of a banter with your peers. So I think for young people it's been a huge thing, quite apart from practicalities like things that mark their rites of passage, for example, exams, 18th birthday parties, things like that have got cancelled. Things like that. So rites of passage, leaving school, prom, rites of passage have got cancelled. So mental health of young people is really, really tricky. I'm interested in a few years' time, I'd be very interested to see the research on babies born during the pandemic. I'm really interested to see social research on babies born during pandemic, where, for several months in early babyhood, they have only had the primary carer and one member or two members of another bubble. That impact on the baby's brain is going to be massive. And
but that's quite interesting, because on one level there's less people coming in, but on the other side, mom and dad, they're both there full time, which
they're both there full time, and
so there's a whole thing,
and the whole thing,
amazing, interesting happens,
because it's about and it's about secondary socialization. So primary socialization.
I did actually want to bring a little evil twist to that. Of course, it does also depend if the parents, while baby making, were activated, because that does have a big impact.
The
glutes are a very important part of that process, and that would create a good container for baby.
That's brilliant.
Because workshop going on.
we know that lots of babies have appeared after workshops. For sure. It's 16 years of teaching. You get to look back and hey, remember that workshop? This is what happened. This is what I did. But you know what's interesting about something as simple as, if I'm depressed, if I can engage in my body, because the depression is the disconnect. And we can get into our body, and we can, and the big thing is, like, there's a million people out there saying, you've got to breathe and get into your diaphragm. And I'm going, yes, absolutely. We 1000% agree, because if you don't breathe, you die. Breathing is pivotal. But right now, more pivotal is actually being able to get your zone 1, your hip flexors, but your glutes, because your glutes are your container. Your glutes are the thing that holds you, that allows you to have shitty feelings and feel contained, have awesome feelings, feel contained, have anger, because there's a lot of that too. There's a lot of chaos in the world, and be able to contain it, not have to and explode it out and put it somewhere and mean and nasty. So, but I like this idea of kind of being able to sit here and learn a practice where I expand my energy into yours, and we sit as though we're sitting next to each other. That's cool. That'd be fun to learn, figure out.
Yeah, it's amazing stuff. But, Roshmi, what you were saying about the babies as well, it's the toddlers who were on the verge of going and starting like preschool,
socialization. Absolutely.
But I think the good thing is with the kids are more adaptable. Kids Kids are more resilient than we are and more adaptable, and you know, there's still a whole lot we can be learning from them.
Yeah. Yeah. It's if the parents have managed to keep their shit together while it's all going on.
That's the bit, isn't it? And you know, you add any other complications into that, like domestic abuse or alcohol or any of those things, and you've got a very explosive situation in households.
The pressure cookers, you know, there are many of them, and it's, yeah, you know, I think it's so hard to quantify the impact that this really odd environment is having on us. But I think for me, the big part in this is helping people understand that they have a lot more control over what they're experiencing and what they feel. And Linda, you'll find that when you're sharing on Zoom with your clients, the difference when they connect in with themselves on how they present themselves in the world. Because you realize you're not helpless in this. And yeah, it's kind of getting that message to people. And it doesn't mean you have to leave your house and go and picket and say, I want freedom. Freedom, you know, like Nelson Mandela for 20 years was in a cell, literally half of what my office is here. You go and you stand in there, you go, what? But he had freedom. He had freedom because it was up here. He embodied it in mind and body, and therefore from a small space locked away from the world, he still inspired the entire world. Those are the possibilities, and it's kind of,
I think Terry Waite talks about that too in his book, about the internal versus external. You know, Terry Waite, who was a hostage,
yes.
you know, where I can't remember where, but he also talks about that, the difference between internal and external spaces.
Yeah.
But I think maybe that's why it is such a crisis in the first place, is everyone's learned to live outside of themselves. My world is what I am, what I do, where I live,
and experience themselves outside in as opposed to inside out.
Yeah. Cool. That's a nice, interesting thought. So how about that as a closing for part one?